So if you clicked on this video, you're probably here for the same reason I was on YouTube months ago, searching this whole heavy arrow theory, Ashby theory, all that type of stuff. And all the videos I see, other than a couple of the Ranch Fairy ones, which I'll link his channel down in the description below, and a couple other ones, it's all just people building the arrows and slinging them at animals and having great success because of the Ranch Fairy or Dr. Ashby or the hunting public, because they said so. They're not doing it because they want to. They just, oh, it's the next big thing, I gotta jump on that bandwagon. I've never been that way. So we're gonna go through a little bit of a history as to why I'm going this route, why I'm making these videos, so that if you're out there and you're like me in the beginning and you're skeptical, or maybe you hung up the bow for a couple of years because you were wounding animals like I was, and I hung up the bow. I quit archery altogether. I hadn't shot a deer with a bow in 3 or 4 years. So we're going to backtrack a little bit. We're going to go through the history, and then we're going to get into the build. And I encourage you to watch this first video in this series, because it's real important as to why I went this route, why a lot of these people went this route. They don't say it. So today we're going to go over that. Stay tuned. So for me, my hunting journey started out with a bow in my hand. I didn't shoot a deer or anything with a rifle until I was an adult. Well, 18, an adult. And I didn't really have a teacher. So my dad wasn't really a hunter. My grandpa wasn't really a hunter. Now, I had uncles and everything that were hunters, but I wasn't around them a whole lot growing up in that context. So I'm a young kid. My parents get DirecTV or whatever, and The Crush with Lee and Tiffany came on, and Realtree Monster Bucks came on, and the show with Ralph and Vicky, I don't remember what it's called. So I knew I couldn't talk my parents into buying me a gun. I was 11 years old. There wasn't really guns in my house growing up at the time, for whatever reason. So after about 6 months of begging, and then on Thanksgiving Day, went to a big family get together, and all my cousins and uncles were out there shooting bows. And my parents bought me one for the following Christmas. It was a Bear Odyssey 2. It was camo with green limbs. And for arrows, there's aluminum. They were brown camo aluminum arrows. They were everywhere. You used to be able to buy them at Walmart, Sports Authority when that was a place here in Texas. You could buy them anywhere. And they were big around, they were heavy, and they were aluminum. And obviously all I had was field points to begin with. I didn't know anything. I didn't have a quick release. I grabbed it with my fingers. I didn't know anything. I didn't have anybody to teach me except for what was on TV, which comes into play later on. So I got out there and started shooting. Well, then for that same Christmas, on Christmas Day, we went to that same family's house, and we had a big get together, and I took my bow. And one of my cousins, older cousin, gave me a quick release, and they were teaching me how to use the pins and how to sight it in, and they had range finders and all kinds of stuff, and they showed me how to sight it in for 20 and 30 and 40 yards, and I was shooting. And I was killing squirrels and rabbits around my parents' and my grandparents' place, which my grandparents weren't very pleased about that, but I was just hooked. The neighbor to my parents' place, some of y'all have probably seen videos out there or Instagram posts out there, has a bunch of property surrounding my parents' and grandparents' place. And I walked over there, asked him if I could hunt with a bow. He said yes. It was a sealed deal. I started killing deer left and right. That Spike being one of the first ones, and no, the first one, and it was a awesome time in my life. I was killing every deer I shot at. I was shooting aluminum arrows with the blue or black ferrule broadheads you could buy at Walmart that were like $15 because that's all I could get my parents to buy me. I was 11, 12, 13 years old, setting up in trees or down on the ground or up against trees, or just spot and stalking this 20-25 acre place and shooting deer. I didn't know any different. I didn't have anybody to go out there with me. I busted way more deer. I got busted by way more deer than I shot. 90% of the time, the deer saw me before I saw it or before I wanted it to see me. But every now and then I got lucky and I was slinging arrows and I was hitting where I was aiming and I was killing every single animal. And I had like a 90% pass through rate. And the only times I didn't have complete pass throughs was when they were way too far that I shouldn't have been shooting at in the first place. But I was, and I was hitting them, and they still died. I still had decent blood trails, but I watched them go down. 50% of the time, at least, watched them go down, and the other 50%, I would go to where I last saw them, and I could see them laying, or I'd walk 20 yards and they'd be laying there, and I never had a deer run more than 70, 80 yards, and I was just shooting aluminum arrows, 4-inch fletchings with 15 to $25 Walmart broadheads that were 125 grains, and I was killing everything I shot at. Fast forward a little bit, I got a job, I got my own money, I'm still watching the same shows. Schwacker comes out, and the whole mechanical broadhead thing just hits, and they're everywhere. Rage, Schwacker, everything. Well, at this point, I'm 15 or 16, and I'm shooting Muzzy broadheads, and I'm shooting carbon arrows, whatever I could buy at Academy out of the little draw box that was long enough, because I was shooting a 31-inch draw length, and I could never find arrows that long. I didn't know nothing about fletching arrows back then. I was buying pre-made arrows. So, Schwacker comes out. Levi Morgan, I think is his name, where he's shooting the plywood sideways and all kinds of stuff. So I go buy Schwackers. I don't know what spined arrow I was shooting back then. They were Carbon Express, I remember that. And I wounded my first deer. My first deer I wounded with a Rage broadhead. It was a good shot. It was a little high, but not too high, and the arrow went in that far. That far. With my former setup, would have been a complete pass through. They would have died. It didn't catch no bone, or it might have hit a rib. I don't know, because it went in this far and came back out. And he ran about 20 yards. The arrow finally popped out. Ran, I don't even know how far. I lost him for a while, and then he come back up on the other side of a gully off property, and I could see him through my binoculars. And he turned around and was looking around. I didn't see any blood, and he was gone. And I spent hours that night looking for him. I spent hours the next day looking for him. Hours the following day looking for him. And that was the first deer I wounded and lost. I thought it was just me. I just thought it was me. So, fast forward, I'm still shooting mechanical broadheads. Didn't pay a whole heck of a lot to the spina arrow. It's just what I could find and afford at the time. And I was wounding more and more deer. And maybe not even wounding deer. I wasn't getting complete pass-throughs anymore, which at the time didn't register because I would still kill the deer. It was just a hell of a job tracking it. A hell of a job finding it. 90% of the time, it was evening hunts, and I wouldn't find it till the next morning when I went out in daylight, and it was hundreds of yards away from where I shot it at, on 2 properties over. I had to go through multiple people to get permission. I had to drive all the way around the neighborhood to the other side and walk this way. I'm grid searching. I mean, it was a nightmare, and it was like that every single deer, and I was still shooting good. And as time progressed, I started being less confident in my shot. Even just target practicing. I could hit a quarter swinging at 50 yards, and I was 13, and I was confident, and I hit everything. I would challenge anybody. There was men in my church have been shooting archery for 20 years, and a couple of them were pretty freaking arrogant, ironic, and they would come out there, and I'd be shooting, and they'd want to challenge me, and they'd lose every time. It was something. My mom says I was born to shoot archery, and I lost the confidence factor. So I thought it was the bow. So it's 2015. I bought a Bear Anarchy HC, and it's been downhill ever since then. Not necessarily because of the bow, but I've always maxed my bows out. once I started shooting, I shot as high as the bow would go, 60 or 70 pounds. I got a long draw length. I don't know why, I just did, not any particular reason. And man, I lost confidence more and more and more. And then me and my wife started dating. It was our first deer season together. She's sitting in the blind with me, and I shoot a pig of a 7-point, and it was a perfect shot. I was shooting fixed braided broadheads. I believe they were G5. It was right around the time I started discovering G5 stuff, and fixed blade broadheads. Still the same Carbon Express arrow. Don't know what spine it was, and it hit the opposite shoulder. Didn't quite break the shoulder, but it was in that deer, and he ran, I want to say, about 80 yards, and no blood trail whatsoever. Zero, zilch, nada. There was none. I just saw where he ran through the timber and had an idea of where he went because of the deer movement at that time of year, and walked up on him. I was not doing a great track job. I just walked up on him. The following season, the buck I had been watching for 4 years on that property was an 8-point. I love 8-point. Most of my wall is 8 points. Big, symmetrical 8 points. There's a monster one on this property. I've been watching him grow for 4 years. This deer was 6 years old. I've known him since he was a button buck, and he walked out at 25 yards, and I smoked him. At this time, I was shooting golden tip, the Ted Nugent white and black zebra arrows. I still got the same arrow over there with the same freaking piece of crap Rage broadhead in it, and it hit that deer and bounced off, pretty much. It was a 500 spine arrow. It hit that deer. I don't know how far it went in. The blade didn't open up and bounced back. The arrow did. Now it caught a little bit of the shoulder, but not a lot. And I'm shooting 60 pounds at this time. The arrow bounced back, and that's no exaggeration. I'm not playing around. That was the buck of my dreams. The one buck I'd been chasing for years. History, you watch all these hunting shows. They're talking about this buck they've been chasing for years. This was that buck for me. This was the TV buck, and I smoked him, and the arrow hit and went whoo, and bounced back. The deer was standing. I know exactly where the deer was standing, and the arrow was 10 feet closer because it had bounced back that far. It broke my heart, and I put the bow up. My confidence was so shot. I was tired of losing animals. I was done. I'd finally gotten a couple deer rifles that I bought for myself, and I hung the bow up, guys. I quit archery. And that was the only passion I had in that time in my life. I didn't have anything else. I did everything archery, and it broke my heart, and I gave up. I hung it up, and I picked up a rifle and I started shooting deer. And nothing against rifle hunters. I still rifle hunt, but to me it's not the same. And I never felt like it was the same, but I love hunting. I love harvesting animals and respecting the animal and conservation and the meat and everything. So I wasn't going to quit hunting. Just put the bow up. And it bothered me. So fast forward to, let's say, 2019 spring. A little bit before 2019 spring. I wanted to get into turkey hunting. I looked up some turkey hunting stuff on YouTube, and there was the Hunting Public, and it changed my life. I saw a video, I think it was 2019. I saw a video of Aaron, I believe is his name, from Hunting Public, and he's holding an arrow like this, and he's like, best whitetail setup, or something like that. That was the cover art thing. And I clicked on it, and an explosion went off in my head, you guys. The Ranch Fairy talking about heavy arrows and how back in the day people were shooting heavy arrows and didn't even know it, getting complete pass-throughs and finding deer that, there wasn't no 100-yard track job. The deer was dying. The arrow was going straight through them. An explosion went off in my head. It was like, that's what I was shooting as a kid, and I never lost an animal, ever. sure as hell didn't have an arrow bounce back at me. And I dug my freaking bow case out from underneath my bed, and I flipped it open, and it just, I started going through my arrows, and it was the gold tip Ted Nugent ones that were 500 spine, and I'm like flingy, 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 flingy. Rage broadheads that you could bend and break. I could go like this with the blade, and it wasn't cutting me. And it, dude, it just clicked. Everything they talk about makes sense, because back in the day, and I say back in the day, I'm not that old or anything, but when I got into archery, there was like 3 TV shows where people were shooting with bows. It was still very, around where I was at, it was very, like, people didn't want you hunting with bows on their property because they didn't think they were lethal. So I started chasing that road. I started watching all the Ranch Fairies videos. I started studying the equipment that I had. I started shooting a bow again for the first time in like 2 years. And I started the process of building heavy arrows, and man, it just clicked. So that's my backstory, you guys. I'm not here because the Ranch Fairy said so, or Hunting Public said so, or even Dr. Ashby said so. I'm here because back in the day, never lost an animal. As I started letting people that were getting paid by companies to shoot garbage influence me, I started wounding animals, losing animals. And that's not ethical. As hunters, we should all strive to be as ethical as possible. And I can tell you right now, I was never, ever doubting my shot or my lethal capabilities when I was finger shooting aluminum arrows. Never. Never. But when I started shooting the latest and greatest flashy commercial stuff, I second guessed every shot I took. Every shot. Everyone. So for me, this is a journey to redemption. I've yet to kill a deer with the new heavy arrow setup. I have killed pigs with it. I don't even have to redo all of this to prove that process, because I remember 15 years ago killing deer. I remember it. And I know that that's because those were heavy arrows. I know that's why. Because it wasn't until I started shooting light and flappers and Twizzlers that I started wounding animals, you guys. So it's already been proven to me, but we're going to go through this process. I'm going to take y'all along this journey. We got the components over there from Serious Archery and Ethics Archery and boning and all that stuff. We're going to go through this process. We're going to figure out what spine. We're going to do everything together. We're going to go down this journey to redemption together. And next season in 2021, we're going to put down a deer. Whether it's a doe or a buck, I don't care. It's about redemption at this point. We can all, it's just high fence, low fence, free range, whatever, hunting over feeders, not hunting over feeders. As long as we're out there, we're being ethical hunters, we're being conservationists, we're being the best hunter we can be, and most importantly, introducing younger generations to our sport. It doesn't matter how you do it, as long as you're ethical. So if you believe that you can be ethical with a lightweight setup and mechanical broadheads, by all means you do it. But I'm set down this heavy arrow journey, and I have no plan to turn back. So like I said, we're going to go through this journey to redemption together. I hope y'all enjoy it. Like, comment, subscribe. If you got any input for me or better recommendations for arrows and everything, it's almost impossible to find 250 spine arrows right now, thanks COVID. But Serious Archery hooked me up, and I say hooked me up. I bought some. You know, I'm not sponsored by anybody. I ordered some arrows just like everybody else was gonna do, and they had some, so I got 250 spine, 300 spine, and we're gonna fling them at some animals this year. So y'all stay tuned.